Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Well, this is the first one for this particular series. Again, thank you for your suggestions. Please keep them coming. I'll be selecting some more throughout the several coming days, and hopefully if everything works out, I'll be able to get all 3 to 5 videos knocked out before the end of the week. Otherwise, I'll be able to finish them probably towards, let's say, early next week or so. So, as always, the best thing regarding these suggestions is most of the unknown, original, interesting type stuff. That's the kind of stuff that I look for, and as an added bonus, if it involves any kind of particular theme that's current, that's another added bonus, and that's the reason why I picked this particular cryptid. Never heard of it before. I'm sure probably most of you haven't out there either. It's definitely not one of the big ones out there when it comes to its recognizability, but considering the stuff that I'm about to talk about here, it is still very, very interesting, very captivating cryptid. And what makes it so interesting is the fact that so many reputable people that are considered important citizens of a town, saw this creature. So whereas before you would have stories of people seeing cryptids or people seeing monsters, and these are just regular, ordinary people, but their particular reputations could be up in the air. This particular cryptid, the attention that it captured, it definitely had encounters with some of the most prominent, I guess you could call them select people, townspeople, I think is the official term. And those are people that are considered to have a prominent status within the town. They're reputable people. They have good characteristics, good characters. In other words, they are good people that they would not be making something like this up unless they were all in on it, which of course is hard to believe. So this particular cryptid or monster is called the Van Meter monster. Again, something I've never heard of before, the Van Meter monster. But it apparently had several visitations upon location in Iowa called Van Meter back in the early 1900s. You'd have to go back in time to around 1903 to be specific. Only time it's been in existence, apparently. Only time it's been sighted, just during that time period. But that's about it. Nothing else before, nothing else afterward. And again, the reason why I picked this particular cryptid too is the timeliness of it, associating stuff that's happening right now that ties into it. Because when you hear that this particular monster apparently dwelled in some mine shafts of some sort, or some caves tied within some mine shafts of some sort, there's that movie that just came out called As Above, So Below, I believe it's called, and it has to do with those like catacombs / caves that have potentially some kind of creatures underneath it on there, and it has, because that film is out just now, and it makes me wonder, my goodness, imagine something like this, the Van Meter monster, being very similar to that movie, As Above, So Below. I haven't seen the movie myself, but people are saying that it's doing pretty well on there. So in any case, the fact that that movie came out, very timely stuff, so that's why I'll talk about it here. So the Van Meter monster, what is it? Apparently, and you'll see a picture of it here, it's a strange creature. It looks like a giant bat of some sort, but that's about the closest resemblance that we can come to. And the reason for that is because even with multiple sightings there in Van Meter, you don't have yet a full 100% concrete description of exactly what that creature looks like. Apparently this creature moved too fast, or it moved everything was at night, so it was much of a blur, so people were not able to have anything in terms of, let's say, a good description on it. The most common theme seems to be it was a creature with giant wings, and those wings looked like a bat of some sort. Very discernible because of the fact that they could fold inward, much like a bat would when it is not flying on there. But also, the most distinctive feature of this creature happens to be a, what do you call it? It has like a horn on the front of its face, which more had like a beak-like feature, more like a bird. But this horn apparently emitted a very, very powerful light of some sort. How? I have no idea. It's by far the most unique characteristic of the creature. It emitted this light almost like a laser. It was a white, blinding light, and there was no impossibility that it was considered anything else, because when most of the sightings were done at night, and it's very, very dark around, to all of a sudden see a blazing light come from the horn or the top portion of the creature's head, you could not mistake it. That's why it's considered its most unique characteristic on there. And the creature itself was about the size of a man or so. There really is no description as far as how big it is in terms of feet or in terms of inches. Instead, the general description tends to be that it is a creature that is either about the size of a large man or a little bit larger than there. And other than that, again, it's very hard to discern anything else based on the fact that this was a very, very fast creature. So here's how the story goes. Again, you have to go back to 1903, and you have to go to this location in Van Meter, when all of a sudden, in that town, and I've included a picture of that town to again show you how remote, how rural this particular location is. So it's not in the middle of a giant city. This is anywhere USA, just in the middle of a rural town, and all of a sudden those citizens were scared out of their minds when one night they suddenly started seeing this particular creature. So what had happened was the creature was apparently visiting this location all of a sudden just one night. And the way it would move, it would apparently jump from rooftop to rooftop. It would let out I believe a screech of some sort, and another prominent feature of it was it had a very powerful stench, like a very not very noxious type stench, very ugly in terms of its very foul, in other words, in terms of its stench on there. One of the first people that saw this creature was looks like a dealer, an implement dealer is what they called him, called U.G. Griffith, and he's one of the first people who saw this creature. He saw it fly across several building tops, so it left it open as to whether the creature was either truly flying across those buildings or if it was hopping or jumping in a large fashion across those buildings, but that was about it. The creature apparently was close enough so that Mr. Griffith actually had some kind of gun with him, either a revolver or a shotgun, it doesn't say, but he fired off several times and apparently hit the monster, but the monster, quote-unquote, shrugged him off like a minor nuisance. So here you have a situation where somebody saw this creature, had a firearm in their possession at that time, fired at the creature, and the Van Meter monster just basically shrugged it off as a minor nuisance. And then the next person to see it, it happened actually the next night. It was a town doctor. So again, it goes back to what I was saying very early in the video. What makes this very nice, this particular creature, is the fact that very reputable people saw it. Very reputable people who have outstanding charactership saw this creature and were not scared to say their experience. So that makes it much more credible in that point. So this was a town doctor and a bank cashier named Peter Dunn. He also saw the creature the next night, and he fired upon it. Apparently he didn't hit it, but the creature at least escaped or ran away at that time. But it left what were called great three-toed tracks, and he was able to actually take a plaster of those tracks, and you'll see a picture of those tracks here. Someone was able to make a, I guess, sketch associated with the tracks themselves, and they were able to see and compare them what else is out there, and it does not look like something that would be from this world, at least considering the very elongated manner of those fingers, and at least considering the wide berth of the space between those fingers as well. And then yet another person saw this creature the next night. So this is now the third night in a row. This was a gentleman by the name of O.V. White, and apparently he was a expert marksmanship. They called him a deadeye with a gun. I mean, this was somebody who was not a novice when it comes to shooting anything, and so he had expert shots. And this is very important because he apparently owned a hardware store, and above the hardware store was his location where he slept. And apparently something was rumbling on top of his hardware store enough so that he woke up on there. So I guess in that era everybody had guns, so Mr. White had his gun ready when he went up to the top of the roof of the hardware store. And again, this is at night. All of these things are happening at night, so there isn't much illumination, but yet this creature is somehow able to perfectly see at night without all this illumination. So he goes up to the hardware store, and that's when he sees something. He saw a creature perching atop a telephone pole. And this was a creature, again, that's very hard to describe. The most common description intends to be a half-human, half-animal with enormous smooth bat wings. But he saw this creature, it saw him, and that's when apparently he shot at it. And again, the creature was hit, but there was it. There was no falling of the creature, no indication of it being hurt, no indication of it being damaged in any way. It just moved at a blinding speed away from his area, and it almost seemed to quote-unquote hop like a kangaroo in this case, with giant leaps, and it would hop across the buildings and then it disappeared in the night on there. But it looks like, though, there was enough sightings at this point that there was almost a pandemic within the town itself. I mean, people were getting scared out of their minds. As always, when something like this happens, one person will tell 10 people, and then those 10 people will tell 10 other people each. And so by that point, everybody was well aware of what was happening on there, and to the point where there were further sightings. Apparently, there was another gentleman by the name of Sidney Gregg. He had a store nearby too. He saw the creature. So again, there was another store owner that saw it. And then another person, this one a high school teacher, saw it and called it an antediluvian monster. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but that's what this person called it. So again, these are all reputable people. You have two store owners, you have somebody that was a town doctor / banker, and then you had a high school teacher. All these people seeing, each with their own eyes, this creature, whatever it was, descending onto rooftops and not really attacking them in any manner, but still scaring the bejesus out of them. So this was enough so that the town was able to take up arms and finally formed a posse of some sort. Apparently they were able to track this creature towards what was considered a local mine shaft of some sort. And they went, it was called like an old brickyard that's very close by, like an abandoned coal mine. I tried to see if there was a picture of this brickyard, but the closest I could come to where it was something like this. And the reason why they discerned that this was the area was when they were helping themselves, trying to track the creature. A gentleman by the name of J.L. Platt Jr. heard something coming from the coal mine on there near that area. So they all went together again, all these people from the town all together at once, all of them armed. They all went to try to see once and for all what is this creature, what can they do to help stop it and its reign of terror on there. And so when they went there, and they apparently made a bunch of noise trying to get the creature to come out, trying to force it to make itself appear so that way they could attack it. Well, it appeared, but not only did it appear, but it also a second Van Meter monster appeared as well, a smaller version, presumably either a female version or a child version of the Van Meter monster. So these two monsters came out, and they both emitted again a blinding flash of light from their horn. And there was I guess a bunch of shots that were fired at that time, but nothing could be done, nothing could be hit. The creatures apparently shrieked and they just flew away at that point. And that was the first I guess, encounter between them and the townspeople. The second one was people stayed at that area now knowing where these creatures quote unquote lived. They stayed in that area overnight waiting for the two creatures to come back, and they did. The creatures returned the following morning, and again more firepower was shot at the creatures. In fact, it was said that when the men had gathered to quote unquote rid the earth of them with their firepower, which was heard far and wide, it was said that the reception they received, the monsters received, would have sunk a Spanish fleet. But aside from unearthly noise and peculiar odor, they did not seem to mind, but slowly descended the shaft of the old mine. So that tells you that these creatures, when they returned, they were met with enough firepower to quote-unquote sink a Spanish fleet. But the creatures apparently, again, just considered all of this a nuisance. They were not harmed in any way. They were not showing any kind of damage of any way. They just slowly took their time descending into the shaft, and that was it. They were never seen again. So once they descended into that old mine of sorts, they never reappeared, nor were they ever seen anywhere else again. And that's it. I mean, that's the story. That's how it ends on there. So again, they appeared once in 1903. This was, I think, about somewhere around October of 1903. And then once the town culminated, gathered together, and tried to find and end this particular horror, they ended it all right, because the creatures descended back into the old mine shaft, and then they never rose from it again. Again, pretty freaky stuff. Because again, when you have movies like The Cave that was released a couple years back, I think like mid 2000s or so, that talks about such experiences of going into mine shafts and going into caves and finding unknown monsters. And yet here you have a particular incident that did happen here in the United States, in Iowa, where so many reputable people, in fact most of the town, saw these creatures, were able to describe them, not in great detail, but at least were able to describe them in unison when it came to the features associated with the creature. And yet this happened in real life. That's what makes it so fascinating on there. But ever since that time period, there have been people that have been trying to discern and see what happened. Like, what was it? What was this creature? What did the townspeople run across? What did they encounter? And probably the best gentleman for this is a guy named Chad Lewis. He did a whole book on this. In fact, it's called The Van Meter Visitor, and I'll show a picture of it here. And this is him essentially chronicling the entire encounter with as much detail as possible related to what people have written in the newspapers, what people have told and passed down across the years. He was also able to try to see if there were any other known creatures within the area, normal creatures like real life animals, that could possibly help debunk this particular myth, this monster. And he talks about like this, like large whooping cranes tend to be the most common I guess mistake when it comes to people thinking that the Van Meter monster was actually a true monster or some kind of extraterrestrial creature. No, when in fact it was something more along the lines of a large whooping crane, again considering the nighttime and the lack of illumination. But his book again covers that area, trying to see if there truly was a way to debunk this. But otherwise, if not, then it truly remains something involving a supernatural, paranormal, or some kind of extraterrestrial creature on there. So very fascinating stuff. Van Meter monster. If anyone has been in that area and knows about the story there in Iowa, please share your thoughts. Show them below. I'll be happy to see and hear, and everyone else would too, if anyone knows anybody, maybe any past family members, anybody related to anybody in that Iowa period during 1903 that happened to come across this creature. Very fascinating stuff. So if anyone has any other information, please post them below. So, alright, thanks again everybody. Take care. Bye.